Hi, this is our first set of recorded notes. You will also find a link to the blank notes under today's date. So I would recommend that if you have a printer, you print those off. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. Either way, you should be taking notes on what I say. You learn the most when you write things down. Also, if I say to pause the video and work on something on your own, please do that. That's where your thinking takes place, and that's where you can check to make sure you're doing things correctly. So just a couple of tips on getting started on these. I'm going to go ahead and switch this. So we're looking at our set of notes now. Again, remember to write things down. So notice it says we're reviewing linear functions. So we have this problem that says write the equation of a line through the point -3, 1 and with a rate of change of m equals 1. And remember, rate of change is slope, but you're going to hear me call it rate of change a lot. And one of the things that you guys need to get used to is using point slope form. It's the easiest form to use when it comes to a linear function. And so as we're using point slope form, a reminder to you, that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And the name of this form tells you what you need in order to write this form. I need a point, which I have, and the slope or the rate of change, which we also have. So we're simply going to plug it in here. Y minus 1 equals 1/2 x minus -3, so that will be plus 3. And there's your point slope form. I like to call this my BFF when it comes to lines. It's the easiest form to use. Watch how easy it is to graph from this form. So I can take this form and see that I have the point -3, 1, and I have the rate of change of 1/2. So up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2, and there's our function. So we've graphed this as well, and graphing from point slope form is a very easy. I'm also going to go ahead, since you are used to slope intercept form, and write this equation in slope intercept form as well. And to get to slope intercept form, I can simply solve for y in point slope form. I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 1/2 x plus 3/2, and I'm going to go ahead and solve for y. And 3/2 plus 1 is 5/2. Do not use a calculator to do that. And that is slope intercept form. And I want to point out to you, though, that graphing from point slope form here is still easiest because of that fractional value of the y-intercept that you would have had. The y-intercept would have been 5.2. So it's just easier here to graph from point slope form. And I have written that for you. So let's go ahead and look at this next section. So first, I want to remind you that this notation, f of x, is exactly the same as y. So up at the top, I actually could have erased every single y here, and I could have written it as f of x. That's called function notation. So when this problem in A part is asking me to find f of -3, what that really is saying is when x equals -3, find the y value. There's a lot of different ways we could do that, and we're going to do those different ways as we go through this problem. As I go back and look at f of x that I have graphed here, we'll call this f of x. I see that at -3, I have a nice pretty y value. So at -3, the y value is 1, and so f of -3 is 1. So let's go to B part, f of 12. Now, yes, I could extend my line, and I could find f of 12. It's actually not a very nice pretty point. So instead, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to plug 12 in for x. And I can use point slope form, I can use slope intercept form, it does not matter. Just for this particular problem, let's use point slope form. So I'm going to use the proper notation. Instead of y, I'm going to say f of 12 minus 1 equals 1/2. This is telling me every time I see an x, I need to plug 12 in. So f of 12, I'm going to solve for that, equals 1/2 times 15 plus 1, which is 15 over 2 plus 1. So that ends up giving me 17 over 2. So that tells me that f of 12 is 17 over 2. And again, that's giving me an ordered pair that's on this line. It's giving me the ordered pair 12, 17 over 2. Or it's saying when x is 12, y is 17 over 2. So let's try f of negative 1/2. This time I'm going to use slope-intercept form. So f of negative 1/2 is, every time I see an x, I'm going to plug in negative 1/2. So I get negative 1/4 plus 5 over 2. To add and subtract fractions, I need to create a common denominator. So negative 1/4 plus 10 over 4, which gives me 9/4. So f of negative 1/2 is 9/4. And take a look, does my graph, does the y value there look like it could be 9/4? And I think it does. Okay, let's look at D part. So following the same strategy, this is saying take your function, and every time I see an x, I need to plug in x minus 1. I'm going to go ahead and use slope-intercept form. So every time I see an x, I'm going to plug in x minus 1. So I'll have 1/2 times x minus 1 plus 5 over 2. And I'm just going to simplify this. So 1/2 x minus 1/2 plus 5 over 2 will give me 1/2 x plus 4 over 2, so plus 2. And that's function notation. I now have this table that I want you to fill in, and this table is concerning the function that we're continuing to work with. So it's saying let x be 1, 2, 3, and so on. Find f of x. In other words, find the y value. So notice I've written over here to the side, I can use either form. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to let x equals 1 and find f of 1. And first I'm going to start off using point slope form. So f of 1 minus 1 is 1/2 1 plus 3. So f of 1 minus 1 is, let's see, 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 times 1/2 is 2. So f of 1 is 3. And I can go ahead and put that y value in the table. It is easier sometimes to go ahead and use slope-intercept form. 1/2 times 1 plus 5 over 2 is 1/2 plus 5 over 2. That's 6 over 2. That's 3. 3's in the table. You do not have to do both. You can do either. So I want you to pause the video for just a few moments, and I want you to fill the rest of this table in and see if you can get that. So go ahead and pause the video. This is what you guys should have gotten. Now let's look at this next question. Go back and look at the table. How does this relate to your homework? Well, if you look at it really closely, think about these y values. 3, 7 over 2, 4, 9 over 2, and 5. You've just written a sequence. What's the pattern? You are adding 1/2. This is an arithmetic sequence where a sub 1, the first term, is 3. And a sub 2, the second term, is 7/2. Notice I switched notation. I didn't use f of x anymore. I used a sub n. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But this is saying the first term is 3. The second term is 7 over 2. So let's look at 6. It says, go back and use notation to write the explicit formula. You've really already done that. You've really already done that. So if you go back and you look at point slope form, y minus 1 equals 1/2 x plus 3. For when we talk about sequences, instead of using x and y, we use n and a sub n. So if you think about this table, go back and look at your table from your homework. This was n, this was a sub n. They mean the same thing. I'm going to come down here, and every time I see y, I'm going to plug in a of n, excuse me. So a sub n, a n minus 1 equals 1/2 n plus 3. That's unexplicit formula. And I say unexplicit formula because I could go ahead and write this in slope-intercept form. I could solve for a of n. I could just add 1. There's a whole lot of different options I can, but anything that's equivalent to this statement would be an explicit formula. Next it says let's write the recursive formula. Now you have not done this before, and we will talk more about this. This is just kind of to get your foot in the door. A recursive formula means how can I get a sub n from the previous term? And I would denote the previous term by saying a sub n minus 1. So for example, if I'm working with the 5th term, n is 5, what would I do with term 4? 5 minus 1 is 4. Well, every single time here we're adding 1/2. Every single time. I take the previous term and add 1/2 to find the next term. But the thing is, I don't know what I'm adding 1/2 to. So when I have a recursive formula, I actually have to write 2 parts. I need a term value. And I'm just going to use, hey, a sub 1, a of 1 is 3. So the first term is 3. To find the second term, I take the first term and add 1/2. I didn't have to use the first term. I could have said, oh, a sub 4 is 9/2, and that would have been sufficient to continue writing the explicit formula. So what I want you to do next is I want you to pause the video, I want you to turn it over to the back, and I want you to complete that whole page and see what you can come up with. And then we'll start it back once you get done. So here we are looking at the back of the notes that you should have already taken time to work. I wrote the equation in point slope form. Remember, I called that your BFF. I went ahead and wrote it in slope-intercept form because that is useful for part 4 at the bottom. I chose to graph by graphing the point -5, 4, and then graphing the rate of change of down 2, right 1. I went ahead and completed the table for you to look at. And then let's look at part 4 for just a second. Again, you can pause the video. I want to notice C part. You could have just looked at your table up above, -12. You already have that. You didn't have to plug 3 into the function. I did want to talk just a moment about D part. This says go to your function and every time you see an X, plug in for it 2x. So I took slope-intercept form and I did that. That gave me -4x minus 6. We see this question once again. Go back and look at the table. It's an arithmetic sequence where we are subtracting 2 every single time. Go back and use notation to write the explicit formula. I did that. Instead of x and y, use n and a sub n. And by the way, I also wrote it in slope-intercept form. So there's point slope form, there's your slope-intercept form. So recursive formula has 2 parts. I need to know what am I doing to the previous term to get the next term. Well, here every single time I'm subtracting 2. But I have to have a place to subtract 2 from, and so that's why I'm telling you that the first term is -8. And again, I could have written there a of 3 is -12. It doesn't have to be the first term, but I have to have something that I'm subtracting 2 from. So that's the end of the first video. Notice that you also have some homework for tonight. Feel free to send me any questions if you have them.